Hello and welcome to Super Respectable. My name is David Lewis in The Hague, and my co-host in Vancouver is Toshio Rahman. How are you?
I'm good, Dave. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Excited to have a guest on the show today after a long hiatus of no guests and just us blabbering back and forth.
Yeah, that's true.
So we have our mutual friend Jesse Moon with us in Ottawa. Jesse, how's it going?
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. Jesse, it's so good to see you. Dave, you should give some background on how we all know each other. I mean, you've known Jesse for a long, long time. I met in college, but we all went to university together, like
Yeah.
10 millennia ago, right?
Yeah, a long time. Well, I know Jesse from a long, long time ago. We grew up together in the same neighborhood,
Oh, really?
just about a block away from each other. So we did pretty much all our schooling together. And then when he went off to Ottawa U for engineering, and then I went to Carleton for political science, where I encountered you. And that's where you met Jesse. I guess you came over to our place a few times. I don't
Yeah.
know when the first interaction happened.
I mean, Jesse, I got to know you because I lived with another mutual friend of yours, Josh, right? I was his roommate for a
Oh
while.
yeah. Okay.
And then I lived with Dave, right? I think that's when I got to know you, and then I moved in with Josh, and then we all kind of just hung out with one another and go to each other's apartments for a while. And then I think the last time I saw you, though, you, Dave, and Steve were living in Chinatown.
That was
Right?
a good apartment. I love that apartment.
Yeah. We had a great view over the park. Good location. Yeah, nice part of Ottawa.
So the first thing with Jesse is, what's up with Dave's hair? You've known him for so long? Have you ever seen Dave's hair this crazy?
No, and it's so funny. We did like a Zoom call with Dave not that long ago with my daughter, who's 4, because she was asking about. I was trying to explain that Dave was in a different time. She wanted to know if it was nighttime where Dave was.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Oh, are you free?" And so we called Dave, and that was my first reaction. It was like, whoa.
Yeah,
the hair looks great. Nice flow.
Yeah, it's quite a disastrous flow at the back, but getting a haircut on Friday, I'm excited to announce after like 3 or 4 months of no barbers and hairdressers being open in the Netherlands, they've reopened this week. So I made sure to get a booking.
Like, Dave, this feels like this is what your hair should have looked like when we were playing hockey as kids, because you could have had the hair flowing out of the back of the helmet.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it should be a lot longer after a year of no cutting, but it's pretty good. I like it.
That's great. So Jesse, you first question out of the bat: how has, because you've got 2 little kids, Dave told me, right? And how's the last year been for you as a dad with COVID? Like, how have you guys been coping?
It's been a bit interesting. So like a year ago, we had our second daughter. Thanks. In January, we moved at almost the exact same time. So about 2 months into having 2 kids, went into like full lockdown. So it was like really nice that my wife, really lucky for our family, that my wife had planned to take a maternity leave for a full year. So that's like, super nice for us that we were able to do that. But having 2 kids at home all day, every day, you can't really go anywhere and can't do none of the normal stuff you normally do with kids. Made it quite challenging. It's very exhausting for her. And I try to help out as much as I can, as getting used to the new working world. I had a lot of like little kids pressed up against the door of my office, which I have like little. It's very nice. I have a nice little office, and I've got little French doors here.
Very nice.
Often their little faces were pressed up against the windows, asking what I was doing, what I was up to. So it's definitely been challenging, but it's also been really interesting, Tosh, in the sense that like my first daughter, I went to work every day that she was for the first year of her life, essentially, other than the couple of weeks I took off as like pat leave. But with our second daughter, I saw her every single day, almost all day. Not that I didn't see my first daughter every day, but she was, but it's just like all day, every day.
Daytime hours.
Daytime hours. You poke out, you say hi at lunch and whatever. So we've been it was definitely challenging.
Yeah.
They're both in daycare now, which is providing nice quiet, much more quiet day-to-day activities around our house.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
has it been like you've been working from you and your wife have, oh, I guess your wife was on mat leave, but you've been working from home for the last year?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, full time, and it's like, at first I think it was kind of like, everyone was just kind of like figuring out how to get used to it, and it's a little bit crazy, and everyone's a bit sympathetic, and then I think at some point in the summer it's shifted to like, all right, this is the new normal, and we
Yeah.
still have to get all the stuff done that we said we were going to get done this year, so let's get on it.
Yeah.
And I would say since the summer, it's probably been super busy, and I find that I work a lot more than I did before because
Wow.
my office is now just 10 steps from my kitchen. And
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
awkward thing is people seem to be working a lot longer hours because the commuting time is gone, but it somehow evaporates and you're just like straight into it. And there's no separation between the work and home life, obviously. So it just doesn't end. Everyone's there stuck in front of their computers. Yeah, fun times. But let's get to the main topic at hand. What I wanted to pick Mr. Jesse Moon's brain about today was MBA. So I think we're all in different phases of MBA world. Jesse did the MBA full-time at Ottawa U at the Telfer School of Business, not Tefler.
Correct.
Good.
Name right. But that's probably a few years back now. When did you graduate?
In 2013.
Oh wow, it's been like a decade. I mean, almost like okay. So you're like much earlier than us. Okay, you're smarter than we were.
Well,
Yeah,
so I'm currently doing an executive MBA. I think Tosh is in the process of considering.
Yeah, well, I got admitted to one, but I'm considering on whether I really should do it or not, or it's just something I'm doing because I'm bored. But Dave, you started what, 2 weeks back, 3 weeks back?
Yeah, about a month now.
Yeah. So like you can provide us with some wisdom, Jesse, on your experiences with an MBA and if it's worth it or not. But sorry, Dave, I digress from your questioning. Please.
No, I just want to go back in time and just see like what brought you around to the idea of doing an MBA, because Jesse did an undergrad in mechanical engineering, if I'm not mistaken, and worked as an engineer for a number of years, and then made the leap into business school. So I wonder if you could talk us through what was going through your thought process back then.
Yeah, so like the impetus was I had got to a point in my engineering career where I had started to do the same type of projects again. And I thought I was getting a little bit bored, where I was kind of like, okay, I can kind of like understand then what the next 5-10 years might look like. And I'm not 100% sure I want to just keep doing these types of things. And so then I thought, okay, well, if in my head, at least I had like three paths, one being, okay, do I go to another similar type of company and try to do, the same type of engineering, but in a different environment? Do I go to a different field of engineering, but then you're kind of starting over again? Or do I go a slightly different path and try to get into more of a management stream? And growing up, my parents aren't in business. There was no like business talk around the house. In an engineering degree, it's very technical. So I had like almost no exposure to like the profession of management. And so in my mind, I thought, well, if I want to progress my career into more of a management area, I figured I needed to understand that piece a little bit better. And there's different paths to that. You don't have to go back to school. You can do that naturally through a experiential learning on a job or through a formal program through a company. But the option that seemed logical to me was to go back to school and do an MBA. And so that was my thinking.
Cool. And Do you remember like what the application process was like? You had to do a GMAT, right, or GRE?
Yeah, exactly. So let me think. The application, I think it was a little bit, different than what it is now. But yeah, you had to do a GMAT, and then there was like which was like a two-part test. I think now maybe three-part test, but it was a two-part test. And where half is like math,
Mm.
and then the other half is like grammar essentially. And so like I obviously like did super well on the math part. That was so easy. And then like the grammar part was much more difficult for me. Because again, in an engineering degree, you spend all your time doing math. You don't spend your time learning how to write well, which is still something I'm trying to learn. And I had decided, like, it wasn't like I thought like a year in advance, oh, we need to go do an MBA. I was kind of like, the company I was working for had been acquired, and I could see that there might be some changes on the horizon. I thought, all right, now it's time to make a change. So I like registered for the GMAT like a month or something after, and got a study book and then wrote it. And then I think I applied to three different business schools. And then ultimately decided to go to the Ottawa U, because I live in Ottawa and my wife is in Ottawa, and we had a house in Ottawa, and it just made sense to do that.
It's so funny you say that, because I was actually talking to Dave yesterday, and for us it's the opposite. So grammar, no problem, right? Because we're art students. But the math for us is like, what? Because I haven't done math since I was like 16 years old, right? Like I didn't have to. So the opposite.
I relate 100% to the notion of just like, even the grammar stuff, where it's like, maybe had I written it right after my undergrad, at least I would have had the like high school memories still working around how proper grammar works. But even then, I did it like 5 or 6 years after finishing university, so it would have been like a full decade after finishing high school.
Totally.
So yeah, you guys are like, I don't know, a couple decades out from doing real math. So that's all right.
That was part of my selection criteria. I was really put off by the idea of having to study before studying.
Yeah.
I just don't like the concept of the GMAT and all that. But thankfully for a lot of the executive MBA programs, that's not a big factor. They look more at the work experience and whatnot. So saved by that.
So Jesse, so you take the test, you get into Ottawa. Out of the 3 unis that you applied for, did you get into all 3, or did you have to consider, or was it 2, or like? What was the decision? How many did you have in front of you?
I'm relatively confident that I got into the 3 that I applied to, which were all Canadian schools. Okay. I didn't apply, like, had I got like a super crazy high GMAT score, maybe I would have looked at like one of the prestigious global business schools.
But I didn't. Wharton or Harvard.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, those are like from a it's like not even a real discussion, because I didn't apply. My score wouldn't have been high enough. But like, oh my goodness, those schools are super expensive. Expensive. But they have all sorts of interesting ROI analysis done on like why it is worth it to pay to go to those schools. So, but yeah, so it really, though, for me, it was like a lifestyle thing that it just made the most sense to stay at home.
Yeah. And then tell us about your experience at Ottawa U. Like, was it a good decision? How were classes? Like, everything you say is recorded and will be sent to Ottawa U afterwards. So, I'm just joking. Like, how was it going to class? Did you do it full time or part time?
Yeah, so I did it full time. So I like quit my job and went back to school. Went back to school full time, which is a decision in and of itself. I totally get the part time thing. It's not. I would say it's not easy either way, right? It's like you just immerse yourself completely with school, or you're immersed completely in work, and then school and your career has to adapt to the necessary time that you'd have to put into it. I would say my experience at Ottawa U was very positive. I enjoyed my classmates. A lot of them are doing interesting things now. I definitely learned a lot from them. I enjoyed, a large number of my professors. I think there's a lot of valuable learning there. I think, from my perspective, what I would say, the courses are similar to what I would imagine a business undergrad being in terms of the breadth of things that you're learning, and then it's just taken up a level and then like condensed. So for me, it was like it's a lot of brand new learning. So I wasn't like familiar with the organizational behavior and financial accounting and economics. These are just not things that I took in an engineering undergrad. So it was a lot of brand new learning from my perspective. I think there's like a balance at OttaWU between, at the time at least, right, between like case-based classes and like, I don't know, just straight learning, which I think both have their pros and cons, and then a lot of like kind of major group projects.
And how did you find, like, did you find the engineering degree harder than business school, or is it hard to compare the two?
I would say the way I think about it, the way I remember thinking about it was that like the MBA was just like a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas that wasn't necessarily like hard. Whereas engineering was the opposite. I think it was harder.
It was just hard.
It was just hard, but I don't know. Once you solve the problem, and you were like, all right.
Did you? Sorry, Dave. Go. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say, in retrospect, do you feel though you could have done that MBA if you were working as well, or taking time off, like leaving your job and doing it full time was the right decision? If that opportunity had presented yourself to do it while working.
It's a great question.
Thank you,
Tosh. Like, could I have done it? Yeah. I think it's all about who you are as a person and like how is your ability to how good are you at context switching?
Yeah.
So I think I'm a poor context switcher. So I think
that's a good term.
I think going back to school full time was the right decision for me personally because it just allowed me to fully immerse myself.
Yeah.
I think I would have found it more challenging to like get home and then get home from work.
Yeah. Then go into like study mode and
go
then
to
family
school
mode.
brain. Yeah. Trying to do your work.
It's so, I mean, I'm in a different situation. I mean, I'm running my own thing now, but people who are in like set hour jobs of, be at your desk 9 to 5 or 6 o'clock, then have dinner, then start studying. I really don't know how they do it because I'm able to sort of be a bit more flexible with my time and organize it as I see fit. But I find it so hard to do that context switching. It's just as you said, it's a real shock to the brain to try and change tracks.
I think like that seems to be a very major problem among higher learning at a older age, regardless of field, right? I mean, like when you're in your 20s or you're in university, pretty much your only focus is like school, and you might get to have a part-time job. But for example, you want to come back to school in your mid-30s, like we are, or our 40s, more likely have a job which you cannot leave. You have a family, obviously, which you cannot leave, right? Like, so like, I don't know how people juggle it. It's just crazy, Dave. I mean, like you must speak to this, like in your EMBA, you must have people who are older than you who have tons of responsibility, and that this is just one more responsibility they're dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe COVID kind of changes it since they're at their computer and they can be also be a bit flexible in switching.
Yeah.
There's not the same level of monitoring going on.
Yeah.
And it's all desk based right now.
Yeah.
But for sure, it's a real challenge for some people who are in quite senior roles.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it.
Jesse, do you think you'd ever go back to school to do a doctorate or another degree or anything like that, or you've kind of maxed out on your education interests?
So like my gut reaction is like
never again.
No, but I also thought that after I did my engineering degree, I didn't think that I didn't have I thought, oh yeah, I'm gonna go out and start working and that'll be it. But like then like, lo and behold, that was like 5 years after finishing, or I was like, I'm out, I'm going, I'm doing a full. And so it's kind of like, I think I would be more likely to switch careers next rather than go back to school for something. Would be like my thinking on like a major shift, I think. The other thing too is like doing a PhD and an MBA are not comparable. Like a PhD is just like an insane amount more work and dedication. In my personal observation, I obviously have not done a PhD, so I can't do that one-to-one. But like in the people that I see that have them, it's another level.
It's insane.
Yeah, stick to the certificates or some other sort of credential like that. So in your cohort, so you said you had 5 years of work experience. So was the age range kind of comparable to that? It was did some people go like straight out of undergrad and into an MBA? Is that a thing? Or
it is a thing. At Ottawa, you had to have a certain amount of work experience. There was a caveat though, for there was an exchange program with the school in France. So there were 2 women who did not have work experience who came to do the MBA, and then also if you were doing the joint JD MBA, so the Juris Doctor and the MBA, so some of those people also didn't have work experience, but not all of them. There was I think 5 people in my cohort who were doing the JD MBA, and I think a couple of them had work experience already. And so I would say like the age range at the time, the median was like 28.
Yeah, that sounds about right for a full-time program.
Yeah.
So
and that's full-time, right?
Yeah.
And then the part-time was older.
You were what? You're 26, 27 when you started yours? A little younger than
I think I was exactly 27, 28, somewhere in there.
Wow. That's crazy. And what's it like being in like a classroom with people, for example, who are a decade older than you, or in their mid 40s, or people who have extensive amount of experiences? Do you find that you can see them as colleagues, or it's just like that old guy? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it like when I was in college, like everyone was my age in our classes, right? But in an MBA, I'm sure you get a whole diverse range of ages and backgrounds and people. Were you able to relate?
Oh yeah, I thought it's great, right? People just have very different perspectives and bring a different view. And I think, if you're going into an MBA, you have to be understanding that like there's going to be people likely from all over the world that you're going to be in this program with you, age ranges, work experience. And that's part of the enjoyment of it is learning from all these other people and understanding what their perspective is, and expanding your own view and how you approach problem solving. And not just that, right? Everyone has different personalities and ways of learning. So I would attribute going into an MBA much more to like being in a work environment as opposed to like doing your undergrad. You know what I mean? It's like, from my perspective, at least, it was like going to work in terms of like your interaction with colleagues, as opposed to like, hanging out with your buds in the back of the class.
So I was going to ask, it's a good point and a good lead into the group work. So that's a big component of MBA studies, which I'm quickly finding out. And it's always a challenge to try and figure out like what are people's different working styles and how are we going to like deliver a final product. I'm just wondering I'm going to take notes here. What are the best practices that you learned from doing group work in an MBA?
It might sound kind of hokey, but like, have you guys done like a personality test? Is personality test the right word? Like a
I know it's got like, it's the AWCF or like there's a name for it, right? They assign letters to your different traits,
right? So there's all sorts of different ones. Myers-Briggs is the type of
psychopath test.
One.
We did that one.
Another option. And so I think those are important important to do, because then you understand how your colleagues work, and then better, you understand how you work. So like an example from my perspective that I thought was interesting was like, which is very, very well captured, was that I like jump into problems often before like coming up with a full plan. I like to like immerse myself and then like come out and then like build a plan and then kind of go back for it, a little bit iterative. Whereas like everyone else in my group hates that, and they like build a nice detailed
come back, Jesse.
And then, yeah, exactly. So so that was like that was definitely a useful thing, just understanding how your new colleagues, how your new team works, and kind of like what their personality is and how they go about approaching work.
Well, you said that, like, you're when you were talking about how you like jumping into things, I think that's a very engineering mindset, right? You like to dive into the problem as soon as possible, learn on the go, get it fixed. Because I remember in first year university, I lived in the dorms, and the guys next to me were engineers, and like they were big. First of all, I don't think they ever slept. Like, I don't know how they survived the first year, but these guys were playing video games and drinking Coca-Cola like all day, all night. But that was the thing I realized, was that they were very, very, like, whenever there was an issue or something, they needed to jump in and fix it as soon as possible. And whereas some other people are a little bit more strategic and really thinking it out, I noticed engineers are very kind of proactive in that sense. But Dave, like, what was your experience? Because we were political science major. I'm trying to like do it so I like touch you like on the thing. We were trying to political science majors. I didn't really have a lot of group work in university. There was like 3-4 times, and I hated it. I absolutely hated working with other people. No control and laziness and slow. I think Dave was my partner one time too, so
that worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we only had it in maybe the final year. The class sizes were just too big in the first and second year. Like first year was like 200 people in our economics and political science 101 class. So no, it's a lot more manageable in this MBA. The cohort is like 100 people, and then they split us in half, and then they do the curriculum half and half. So they're not teaching 100 people at once.
Yeah. And
then you're split into groups per semester, and they kind of change it up a bit. So yeah, it's a bit of a shock to the system, from my learning style, but it's good. It's all part of the experience, right?
Jesse, did you find that like the group work and the leadership kind of stuff in the MBA kind of helps with your job? You have had to implement, rather than the actual core curriculum stuff, but the organizational stuff, the group stuff, the leadership stuff. Is that applicable in your current job or subsequent jobs after your MBA?
Yeah. So like, if I think about the content of the MBA at OUTU, there's kind of like a core set of courses you take, totally. and then you can kind of tailor your degree a little bit depending on what your interests are. But I would say like the core courses set you up really well to move into management consulting.
Got it.
Which was not a goal of mine.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah. Which
is funny, because that is what I've been doing as a career since I completed my MBA.
Yeah.
So your question though was about like, do the leadership components of the MBA translate?
Yeah.
And I would say like to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good that they like take those things and try to help provide you coaching and things like that.
Right.
But I would say that particular skill set, in my personal experience, you learn a lot more from just from experiential learning as opposed to classroom learning. Like watching good leaders and working, for good leaders. Or working for bad leaders. That's how you learn.
Also,
from my perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. What works?
What not to do? Do you think that you started, I think, 1 or 2 companies after the MBA? Do you think you'd have had the same kind of confidence or entrepreneurial spirit to do that without the MBA, or what do you think?
The MBA helped in terms of providing a framework. So again, kind of like thinking back to what me, as maybe the engineer side of me, needs, is to understand understand the framework a little bit better before. And some of the courses that I tailored my MBA towards were a little bit on the entrepreneur side of things. So you kind of understand then a little bit more about how to go about approaching those types of problems. But again, yeah, it probably gave me the confidence to go and do it. But you quickly realize that, a lot of that gets thrown out when you're really trying to start a business.
That's the thing, is like, there's this debate I kind of had where I said, I don't need an MBA. I started like psyching myself up with all these YouTube videos of people who, dropped out of business school or never went to business school and they started big companies. Then I just kind of felt that I had to scratch that itch of, I want to learn about like the basics of finance and accounting and just the marketing fundamentals. I don't care about people who say, an MBA is, just a standard stamp these days. I think it still has like a lot of value, despite, I don't know if you saw Elon Musk's interview with, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, where he's like, there's too many MBAs in corporate America. I don't know what your take is on that. He said there's too many people like working on meetings and PowerPoints and spreadsheets and not enough people doing like product work and making great products. Do you think he has a point there?
I think that is, to me, those two things don't seem correlated. Like, doing an MBA and then building PowerPoints just don't seem like a great correlation. I can to some degree I understand the mentality, because I think that there's somehow a notion, I believe, in corporate America, maybe around someone with an MBA having some sort of like, or them perceiving themselves as having some sort of business superpower, right? Which is like not the case, and in my mind was not the reason that I went back to school. It's what you were articulating, Dave, in terms of like trying to understand like the profession of management and what that entails, and getting like at least a mile wide, inch deep education on that piece, knowing full well that doesn't make me an expert in any particular category. So sure. Should people be spending more time doing and less time, on the administrative side of any endeavor? Maybe that depends on the business.
I think it's kind of easy to pick on MBAs, but having done 3 or 4 weeks of an MBA so far, I think it's already a very valuable learning experience. And I can definitely see the importance and value of just, always learning and studying. I know there's so much out there these days you can teach yourself, but having the structure and the framework of an academic environment is also very helpful. And having the colleagues and classmates to, work alongside is something you just wouldn't get from, teaching yourself. So,
Dave, how long has it been since your master's, since you finished your master's?
Pretty much 10 years. So I was kind of like, do I need to do more schooling? But life is long, and I think you shouldn't just stop learning with, the set framework that you're told to do is, go to university, get a job, and that's it. That's your course for life. I think it's important to like keep, stimulating yourself. And I think it was the right time. COVID is kind of a special case. I think I needed something to keep me from going insane. And so an MBA definitely helped give a bit more.
So Jesse, so what do you do now? Like, what's the current gig that you've got going?
Okay, so as of this morning, I now work for Accenture,
okay,
which is a global management consulting company.
Okay.
Prior to that, I worked for a company called Avenai. So we're an Ottawa-based management consulting firm, largely focused on the public sector as clients here in Ottawa.
Okay.
And in October timeframe of 2020, Accenture acquired Avenai.
Oh, okay.
And so now I'm fully part of the Accenture team.
So do you do engineering stuff anymore, or no? Have you shifted more towards management, or it's got a little bit of both? No, eh?
There's no component of engineering in the work that I do. No, it's all related to strategy, project. We got a major project delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you come across Avenai? Was it through MBA network?
It was through a mutual contact. So someone knew that I had just finished my MBA, and introduced me to, at the time, the four founding partners of the firm. We sat down. We had coffee, which was kind of an interview, and then I ended up getting a letter of offer and was hired by that company.
Wow.
So it wasn't through like the official MBA network, but it was because someone knew that I was doing this, thought it was worthwhile that I was connected with these guys.
Yes, I was curious actually, your MBA network, what they're up to these days. Are you still in touch with a lot of them? Are they in Ottawa, or have they, it's a mix of things, I guess. What's the situation?
Yeah. So like one of my colleagues from my MBA works for the University of Ottawa now.
Okay.
Both as a professor as well as I think in their professional learning area. A number of colleagues work in kind of management consulting fields globally. And then a number of people also seem to work for Canadian banks.
Oh, interesting.
Those kind of seem to be the two main areas, seem to be kind of consulting organizations, seemingly all around the world, and then the Canadian banks. Those seem to be the two major.
You made light of something a little earlier ago. I mean, you're in Ottawa, which for our listeners is the capital city of Canada. So did you find that some of your colleagues or some of the stuff you were learning or the organizations you were attached to with or the MBA was attached with was very government agency based as well because of the strategic location of that? Or like if I did an MBA at Harvard, for example, or at the University of Calgary, which are equivalents, right? And I'm joking there. But we always try to insult and isolate one person on our podcast each episode.
There's one sponsor per episode.
So it's University of Calgary. This one. But did you find that being in Ottawa was a very different experience? I know there's nothing to compare it to because you didn't do two MBAs, but was it very government agency focused or public sector focused?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. Almost not at all.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I think it just looks at the business of being a business of management.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is actually a really important thing, is that whether you're doing that in the private sector or the public sector,
right,
the general principles should remain relatively similar. Of course, there are different approaches and there are different considerations, and the public sector organizations are not revenue generating organizations. But good management is kind of good management.
Oh.
And I would say that like there is some there was a lot of focus actually on industry. People came to give us talks. We went a lot of places. There was a trip. There was a European trip that we took where we went to visit a whole bunch of organizations in Europe to understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
So no, but everything I learned in that MBA has been almost one-to-one applicable to providing professional services in the management consulting space into the federal public sector in Ottawa.
Huh. It's interesting because we all studied in Ottawa, and 2/3 of us grew up in Ottawa. That I always feel like there's two tiers in the city where, we did political science, Tosh, and we were exposed almost entirely to like the government side of things, the politics aspect. But I knew at the back of my mind, Ottawa has a tech scene. There's this big tech sector in Ottawa. They call it Silicon Valley North.
Yeah.
It was just like totally separate from my existence, had no exposure to it really. And I guess it would take something like a business school or something drastic to get me into that world, like to really start making like active networking inroads. But it's just interesting how Jesse's been able to. He's I guess now straddled both worlds. He started off in the tech sector, doing engineering work, and then moved into more government related side of things. So it's cool that you've got both sides of our beautiful capital city.
Jesse, do you know, Dave talks about how he used to play football or soccer with the Shopify guys. Do you know them as well?
I don't know them like Dave knows them. I know I was exposed to Harley Finkelstein, because he had done his MBA also at Ottawa U.
Okay.
And so through our MBA, we went over to Shopify and this would have been in 2012, so pretty early stages, Shopify years, to see what they were up to and learn about what they were doing as an organization.
Yeah, that one really hurts my brain. I mean, I wouldn't say I knew all the Shopify guys. I played with one of the co-founders for a number of years on the same team. And I thought nothing of it. I just asked, what do you do? And he said, I work for a tech company, Shopify. And I thought, okay, that's cool. And then I go and leave Canada and I check the Globe and Mail and they're on the front page pressing the New York Stock Exchange buzzer, the bell. Yeah. And I thought I should have maybe been keeping a bit more tabs on the situation there.
Now he owns his own football team pretty much, right?
Yeah. Now he owns the team, which is not that hard.
That's so funny. So I know we don't have too much time left with Jesse. Jesse, my last question, I know Dave might have a couple more, but my one is like, what's the future holding for you from like a career aspirational point of view, personal growth? I mean, do you think you'll ever start your own company, or what are you planning? Or are you pretty happy and content where you are with your job and background? Without diving into your deepest, darkest secrets, but I just meant like, I don't mean specifics. I don't mean you to out anyone else, but like, will you do further education? Will you, is there room for growth? Is there something, for example, when you made that transition from engineering to your MBA, you had mentioned that you were looking more in terms of the management stuff. I'm looking, is there a place for, like, what's next for Jesse Moon is my question in the most broadest of terms.
Yeah, I think the acquisition, so I think the timing was interesting from my perspective for my own personal growth, for Accenture acquiring the company I had worked for, because that's almost like changing jobs.
Oh wow!
Where like we went from, I mean, my day-to-day in theory shouldn't change a whole lot, but I went from like an 80 person company to a 500,000 person company globally. Is how big Accenture is. And in Canada, they're like, I'm not totally sure about how big they are in Canada, but probably a couple thousand.
Yeah.
And Accenture is like, they do everything and anything related to professional services. They're in that business. And so all of a sudden it opens up a whole new door of like personal growth potential, learning and development potential. Industry potential. All of a sudden my focus on public sector was because I live here, and that's what our company's previously our company's bread and butter is. But now all of a sudden, every industry, every country in the world, except for a few, is where Accenture does work. So I have to spend some time now reflecting on what I want out of my career and what I don't want out of my career now that I'm part of a truly global organization, regardless of the type of business that it happens to be in. There is always part of me that thinks about the world that I was, the tech world that I was in before was all about products. And so part of me has always been a little bit sorry that I'm no longer in the product world. Whereas now I'm totally immersed in services. You know, I liked building a prototype and holding it in my hand. There's something very fun about that. And having an entire organization aligned around that product and delivering that product. Whereas services, you know, your company's strategy is to make someone else more successful, which is always something that you kind of have to just, or I have to just think about a little bit differently. And the products that you build aren't the same things that you're holding in your hand. It's a tool for them. It's a tool for someone else to use to help them in their day-to-day, or help them, you know, change the way they go about doing things.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I've never worked for a management consultancy like Accenture, but I've worked in consulting, and I guess the cool thing is that it gives you a window into so many different sectors and industries. A very small window sometimes, but a window nonetheless. And I think that's one of the best things about working in consulting at that level, is just the exposure and breadth of people and experiences that you see. It's almost like doing another MBA in a way.
Yeah, and I'm excited now to, like, you know, learn from a truly global team. You know, some of the work we do in Ottawa, there are now, you know, Accenture will open up the like global window into like, here is some work that we're doing in another continent in this space. Let's bring those people over and have a conversation. Awesome, let's do that. And then it's like a whole new set of learning and you know, leading practices and learning from mistakes that you wouldn't have access to. So that part is kind of interesting.
It's amazing. It's all this change has happened from your house. It's in COVID times, and you've just changed into Accenture, and it's all happening from your desktop. I just find that so surreal.
Very.
Yep, I definitely agree with that.
All right. Well, I guess we should leave it there. Thank you for giving us your lunch hour on this Monday, 1st of March, which is also St. David's Day. I have to give a shout out to my Welsh brethren. But yeah, we really appreciate your time and your insights from the MBA world and MBA life. So thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much.
Super nice to catch up with you guys.
Jesse, if you have any fans and people reply to us, we're going to forward all the mail, the thousands and thousands of emails to your email. So get ready for some replies.
Can't wait.
All right, you guys. Thanks for everyone. Dave, Jesse, see you guys later.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.